Danelle Lejeune, and I'm here with Issa Lewis, and I'm here because I host my husband and I host the Ossabaw Writers Retreat out on Ossabaw Island, and Issa was one of our literati. However, that's not how I met her. I met her on a road trip where we had our pictures taken with a giant pink Yeti at a donut shop, experienced the craziest truck stop bathroom situation with like out of this world technology bidets in
Yes,
Indiana.
I had forgotten about the
Truck
bidets.
stop bidet will never leave my mind. And it was definitely an adventure road trip. It was fantastic, and it's the best way to meet another poet, I think. Although I think we first were introduced in a group thread about being mobs and trying to go to writers' residencies.
Yeah, I think
That
that was our initial contact. We were connected with Tara Betts.
that's right.
She
That's right. I went
put
to
us
high school with
together.
Tara, and then we got connected somehow through that, and then we decided to do the book tour opening in our childhood hometown. And did you share? No, you didn't share a press with her, but you worked for Trio
I
somehow.
did. I did for quite a while. When Tave Nice was still the executive director of that. I worked with that, and I
Yeah.
know Tave and Tara through our MFA program, New England College, when it was still just poetry. MFA, and that's how we knew each other. Tara and I were in the same cohort, and I think
Nice.
Tabe was one class behind me, maybe two. I don't, it gets fuzzy. Um, but yeah, so that's how we all knew each other, and then she linked us that way, and then we were just talking a lot and had books come out pretty similar time. And I did
Yes,
what my mother told me what never to do, which is to get in the car with internet friends that you've never really met.
that's right.
Completely broke that rule and drove across the country.
That's right. Yeah, we went from Chicago to Iowa and then back to Michigan, where your home base is.
Yes,
And it was I hate to use the word epic, but it truly
it
was.
really was. I had such a great time.
Me too. Me
I
too.
love
And
adventures.
same. I haven't had a road trip since that was that much fun. So, it goes without saying we should do it again. But somehow I talked you into
Really.
coming to our writers retreat one fall.
It wasn't a hard sell. I mean, I really wanted to come. I know I had to wait a little bit for funding
Yeah.
to come through, and thankfully my supervisor at the time was able to pull some strings and get me funding through my workplace for professional development. Even though I don't teach poetry professionally, I teach comp rets at a local university. But she was like, nah, this is close enough. You're going to get more out of this than some conference somewhere. So I said, yay. And I was
Wonderful.
able to come down for the fall,
Yeah,
I believe it
it was the
was.
fall retreat. And you say it's not a hard sell, but for a lot of people, the fact that it's wilderness and alligators and shared bunk rooms, community bathrooms, all of that stuff is a real contradiction to our fellow residencies with private rooms, spas, and massage therapists on site. So, in some ways, it can be a hard sell.
I
But
love being out in the middle of nowhere. To me, that's the best place to
same.
be.
And mhm.
And as my book Sonder talks about, being out in the middle of the nowhere and exploring those little cracks in humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your favorite part about the island or the experience?
I thought it was one of the most scenic places that I had ever been. It was gorgeous. I don't spend a lot of time down south, so it was lovely to sort of see that and be in that area. I loved the house itself. The building was just fantastically old and wonderful. I feel very grounded in places like that. I feel very at home
Yeah.
in, rickety old places and houses with no right angles in them whatsoever because they've just gone crooked over the years. And I loved it.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about it too. And since your visit, we've actually been able to give tours of the mansion as well,
Ooh.
um, and have pictures, but I can't share them with anybody ever in my whole life. That's the deal they made when I took them.
Oh.
But I have them. That's what matters. So you have a new book coming out from Finishing Line
Do.
Press. Let's talk
I
about
do.
Sonder.
Yes. So Sonder is a word that I learned. Um, I don't remember when and where I learned it, but it's a noun. It is the realization that other people are leading lives just as full and complex as your own. It's that sort of deeply rooted empathy
Yeah.
for other people when you realize like, oh my gosh, like you're not just a passerby. You have a family, you have a life, you have hobbies and interests and worries and cares and loves. And um so when I heard that, it made me think about some of the things that I love the best, which is going to sound super morbid. I love cemeteries, love them. I could spend all day. I have spent all day, many times. And I am actually part of a community-led website slash app that seeks to document and photograph every single interment in the world. So
Wow.
we go to cemeteries, we catalog, we photograph, we double check with like city clerks and sextons and things to like make sure who's where and that everything is where it's supposed to be. We GPS tag so that people who are doing their genealogy work can find these places and find their family members. And there's something about that to me that is deeply, deeply respectful and deeply honoring of who these people were. I will never meet them. I personally am most drawn to like the tiny little rural cemeteries out in the middle
Yeah.
of a farmland, like 400 at most people in there and it's small and they're all old and I love that. Um, the newer ones are great too, but I just love the old ones. And that also set me down the path of headstone cleaning and restoration. So the ones that are fallen over and broken and dirty and moldy and mildewy and covered in stuff, myself and some of my friends, we fix them. We've learned the
Wow.
best practices, the best products to use that don't damage the marble. Most of them are marble from back in the day. You might get a limestone or a sandstone every now and then, but it's usually going to be some sort of porous stone that is very prone to weathering and breaking. So we fix them. So that is kind of where Sonder goes, because I like to, as I would do this work, I like to think about who they were, or at least imagine who they were and imagine the lives that they led and the place where they are and what that must have been like for them at that time. And so a lot of the poems in Sonder um, are sort of cemeterial, um, funereal. I don't know. They're honoring those spaces that a lot of people, I think, tend to avoid because it creeps them out or they don't like thinking about mortality of themselves or their loved ones. And who does? I mean, nobody likes to really think deeply about that. But at the same time, I love the fact that in years gone by, cemeteries were social gathering places. People would eat lunch, they would picnic next to their loved ones' um, burial sites to include them and to be with them. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Like, way to keep them as alive in their memory by including them in your life. But I feel sad when I see some of these older stones that are fallen over and broken, and clearly no one visits and no one cares, and their families are gone or moved away. And so I like to adopt and care
That's
for them.
that's wonderful. I've only attempted to help clean a cemetery plot once, and it was an all day deal just to do one headstone. It seemed like,
It can
so
be, it
that's
can
not
be.
easy.
It there's plenty of TikToks that make it look very easy and very
Yeah.
fast, but it's really quite a slow process. Um, And so linking that with also my general love of history, if I could go back and redo my life, I might have been a history major, um, because I love the stories. So
Mm.
there are several poems um, that are sort of imaginings of people's lives and what they must have been like, either based on photographs. I had a real bender where I was writing about historical photographs and what those might be like.
Yeah, is
Um,
that what your first book, or the Infinite Collisions?
that was based very much on my husband's family history, their property that they had for 4 generations,
Yeah,
um, which I still pass by when I can, and I go and clean their headstones because the cemetery is just like a half a mile down the road. So go clean them up. And yeah, I love to feel connected in that way with people I love and even people that I don't know.
I love that. We have time. Would you like to read a couple poems from Sonder?
Absolutely. Let me
Wonderful.
find
And
some
while she's
good
looking that up,
ones.
I'm just going to let you all know that it is available for pre-order, and I'm going to be posting the link on, if I haven't already, on our Facebook page, on our Instagram, and then this video will be made into a more polished production with end credits, and it'll be available there as well.
So I'll read you a couple here. They are in the book. They are not titled. They are just numbered, and then they're listed in the table of contents by first lines. So I'll read you a couple there. So this is the opening poem. Inside every eye is yet another curve reversed, reflecting another image projected. If we look closely enough, we can see it. We realize their face is our face, their feet our feet. What sweetness to see their wanderings. And here, here's another one. So this is number 4. We think of stone as time, a defiant shape. Its face gazes at the sky, impassive, a challenge. We see it unmoving, though we are moved by all the years it contains. We put words on stone, graven or relief, because we want to remember. The sky eats memories. Mm. So this one is not necessarily, you know, cemeterial, but this actually came out of a writing exercise I did with a writing group I was a part of for some time. We played around with words, um, choosing a word and then looking at the cognates within the language, all the different words that sort of are based off of that word, which I personally love as someone who loves language. I'm my third calling. I could have been a linguist. So the word that I had was genus, a class of things that have common characteristics. So I kind of played around with this one, and this is kind of a prose poem. At our roots, we have spread, we have soil, we have feet germinating, toes scrabbling below. Above our nascent beings squinting in the sun, we have awareness, we have disorientation, we have longing for progeniture because the upward path is unknown. We have faces, we have difference, we have distrust and malignance because we have lost sight of our innate similarities, that place where our feet tangle and touch in the grit, our cognates. We have familiar, we have same, but we have forgotten that.
For those who don't understand or know a lot of the poetry lingo, can you explain a little what a prose poem is?
Sure. And I don't write them very often. This one just sort of came out. So a prose poem is one where you're not really exploring line breaks in a a physical way. It looks on a page a little bit more like just a regular old paragraph. You are still playing with the music of the sentence, of the line, of the phrase, but it's not going to be necessarily represented by a hard break in lines, if that makes sense. So it looks like prose. It's still a poem, at least according to me. There are some out there who would argue, but that's a whole other Zoom.
No, it is. It is a whole other
It
Zoom.
is a
That can
whole,
get people all riled up. What's the difference between flash memoir, flash fiction, and a prose poem? And there, I mean, it's a very gray space that those things occupy.
indeed. Yeah, I remember people really popping off at my MFA program one day.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like we completely lost the thread and everyone was gone. Um, this one I'm going to read for you. This appeared in, I want to say it's Rust and Moth a couple years ago. And this is inspired by something in a cemetery that I found. So um, this is a burial that I found for someone. For some reason, they didn't know who this person was, and he was buried, but um, they no one gave him a stone, no one gave him anything. I found his name, or I found his recording on a ledger in the cemetery, like showing that he was there. But they just sort of put him in the ground, and they're like, we don't know who this guy is. And this is a trigger warning. He took his own life. Um, and I was very saddened by that. Like that felt very bittersweet to me. Um, So this appeared in Rust and Moth as Hanged Man 1913. And this is just listed in here as number 7. One cannot argue with the decisiveness of a wooden beam, the fact of a roof slant. Hard edges speak to finality, to a choice firmly made. In rider weight, the hanged man is head down, suspended by a single foot. The other leg crosses behind, a casual dangle. It may be interpreted as surrender or sacrifice or breaking old patterns. I see a straight line between a painful present and an ecstatic oblivion. Another interpretation is suspended in time, and that's what you became, a nameless man cut from a rafter and laid in the ground with no ceremony, no stone, nothing to remember you but a scant entry etched in a ledger. Unknown male hanged himself 11/4/1913. This is your conclusion, to obscure yourself in rest. 100 years later, I only know where you are, never who you were. Old patterns broken, a missed opportunity. Yeah, just something about his story really kind of touched me.
Yeah.
Let's see here. One more good one. Okay, so this one also comes from um, a cemetery find. This one actually is my relative. Trying to remember what her exact relationship is to me. I have, as you probably guessed, done extensive work on my own genealogy, and my mother's branch on her father's side is, what's the right word? I'm going to go with tangled. I'm going to go with tangled. Let's just say ancestry.com does not want to draw the lines when I'm like, no, this person's married to this person. And it's like, are you sure? And I'm like, no, I promise it's true. Um,
Mm.
it gets a little weird. There are two Emma Weldons. One is Emma Weldon by birth, who went on to marry someone, and then another one is Emma Weldon by marriage, who married the birth Emma Weldon's brother. It's convoluted. So this Emma Weldon, I believe, is my second or third great aunt, and she's actually buried in a cemetery that I grew up pretty close to, which is I just wasn't into genealogy at the time. But my mother and I went and found her. She's very close to um, my great great grandfather and grandmother's grave. Um, and on her stone, my mother and I just got a huge kick out of this. You know, it says the name, it says the dates, and the little epitaph underneath says, "She did the best she could." And we're both like, is that feels like faint praise? I don't, what a strange thing. I've since seen that on other stones too, so it must have been a thing. They didn't just, make this up for her. Um, but I don't, a strange thing to say. She did the best she could. And I'm like, same, Emma, same. Um, so I wrote a poem about that, with the note, she did the best she could. Long ago there was a woman whom I will never know, who raised some children and committed some sins, and made dinners for families who lost loved ones, and argued with her husband sometimes, and slammed a door when she was angry, and taught her daughters how to sew and make soup, and buried a 3-year-old son, and accepted dinners after from the neighbors she'd fed before. And now here on this stone, bearing her name, all I can know is when she came into this world and when she left it, and that some well meaning relative shrugged their shoulders for an epitaph and left it at that. I don't know that phrase. It's just it's strange to me, and I know it's probably something that's just, out of time and not something that we would say today, but what a way to sum up a life. Did the best she could. I'm like, yeah, me too. Uh,
Yeah, that's a very relatable.
like, aren't we all
Yeah.
just out here doing the best we could? Um, and then I'll just read this one more. This is for some family friends of ours, my mother's best friend and her stepson, whom she was very close with. He and his family, unfortunately, were lost in a car accident thanks to a person who was so high on fentanyl that the doctor was surprised she was alive. She was really not really with it. And so it was a very, very difficult time for us, um, dealing with that, and especially for my mom's friend. So this is for the Spurl family. Sometimes we can plunge our hands into the earth and find crystals, other times just rocks, blunt objects upon which we must write our own meaning. This was a day of rocks, when you changed direction with dizzying speed, grounded, then airborne, with us, then not in a flip. We had to write meaning on that too. How we wanted to throw those rocks at the sky, ugly, dumb rocks with no shimmer or glint, gray as the ash of burned grass, of wet asphalt, of a too long night, blunt as bad news over the phone. We kept digging in the earth for something we wanted to keep, stared at our dusty hands and looked for meaning, for how to live in a world that doesn't sparkle anymore. We cast the gravel we found like mystics, divining. Each pebble tried to tell us something, but we don't speak the language of stones.
I love that poem.
I love it too. And
I think
my mom's friend, they've been friends since I was in, you know, kindergarten, somewhere in there. Like it's been 40 years that they've been best friends. And I knew Jeremy. I didn't know his family, his wife and his children, but um, Cheryl has been like a mother to me. So when I wrote this, I sent it to her, and she was inconsolable for a great deal of time, and she said that this helped to think of it in that way. So I was glad to write it.
I read another poet said once that he was getting ready to give up on writing when he realized that sometimes our words, as hard as they are, fill a hole in someone else's heart that are those words shaped.
Hmm.
And he said it way better, and I can't remember who it was,
No, I
but
think I know. I've heard that too. But yes, I agree.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we've now got time for questions and answers, but we have an audience of one. Palace, are you there?
I'm here just unmuting.
Excellent.
I will put my camera back on. Loved hearing this, and as I really enjoy both the mouthfeel of your poems as well as the concept, because I have always loved cemeteries too, because I feel it's a way to connect empathetically with previous generations.
Mm.
I don't think we do death well anymore, at least in the West. And we have disconnected both from the concept as well as from that sense of connection with the past. So for me, wandering around and reading the gravestones creates that sense of connection, even if it's a perfect stranger. So I understand your fascination with that. Um, was wondering, as someone who is venturing into poetry myself, um, literally how many iterations of a poem do you write before you feel that it's ready, or is that just really solely dependent on the poem that it is?
Oh, it is so very, very dependent on the poem, on how you approach it. I mean, there's ones that I have tinkered with for years, and there are ones that came out in one go, and I was like, here it is. This is the thing. Or that needed very minimal addressing. It really is so dependent on, to me personally, on the subject matter. The more emotionally connected I am to the subject matter, the easier it is for me to say what I want to say, I guess, to just let it come out. Um, I want to say that the Stones poem, the one that I just read last, I think I did that one. That was a oneer. Like I let it come out, and that's how it was. And I might have tweaked one word or two here or there, changed a line break, but it stayed that way, how I wrote it initially, where some of the others I've messed with far too long. And then you put it in a drawer because you're like tired of looking at it. And then you pull it out later and you're like, oh, that wasn't actually so bad. Okay, I can fix that now. Um, so yeah, it's very dependent.
Well, that makes me feel better because there are some that I just have to leave alone and for years
Yeah.
and back to. So, but the Stones poem very much speaks to me. Digging in earth is a theme I've explored metaphorically in my writing, and I think it's very resonant. So loved that one. And then here's a very craft-oriented question. I noted when I was reading somebody who was doing some ekphrastic poetry, writing about artwork, that she had a very unique form of punctuation. It was part of her style. So not having seen your poetry on the page, just having heard you read it, do you have any punctuation eccentricities or something that might indicate, oh, this is an Issa poem?
Um, I don't think so. I think I'm pretty straightforward. I leave that to the Emily Dickinsons and the Muriel Rukeyser's and the E. E. Cummingses of the world. I think they're wonderful trademarks, but I think sometimes people do it in a way that's kind of forced. And this is
Mm,
no dig to anyone that people read and love and enjoy. I know that if I were to do it, it wouldn't be authentic to me. It would just
mhm.
be me trying to be cool. And I'm like, eh.
Yeah.
So I tend to stay away from it myself. I play more with the line breaks themselves and how I want people to read that. Like, where do I want them to take their breath? Where do I want them to pause? Where do I want to put emphasis on this particular word in a sentence that would otherwise be buried? If I put it at the end of a line before a break, it gives people literally that extra moment of lingering on that word before they move over to the next line. So that's where I put a little bit more of my attention.
Hmm.